Who are my preseason awards, including MVP, Most Improved, Offensive Player of the Year, and more?
You are Locked On Terps, your daily podcast on the Maryland Terps. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, everyone? I'm Tre Moore, host of Locked On Terps, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, and thank you for making us part of your day. And today's episode is brought to you by the Game Time app. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use Locked On College for $20 off your first purchase. College football is officially back. I'm sure some of you guys watched the games this weekend. I did. I watched USC's win against San Jose State and struggle a little bit on defense again. I watched Notre Dame, Sam Hartman look really good. I watched all the games this weekend, and I could not be more excited for college football to be back. And it's officially game week, the first game week of Locked On Terps. We have an actual game to talk about and get into, which we will get into a ton this week. I could not be more excited to talk about an actual game instead of all this previewing and all this different things on the show, which is, of course, fun to do, but we live for the games. That's why we do it. That's why we make these podcasts, is because of the games, and I can't wait to watch them play this weekend against Towson. But before we get into Towson more, I want to talk about my preseason awards before the season start, including Freshman of the Year, Offensive Player of the Year, Defensive Player of the Year, Most Improved, all of that. We're going to talk about all of it. And then after the season, I'm going to give you my awards of what actually happened and compared to what I guessed. So we'll see how well I guess and see what happens overall. I'm also still under the weather. So if you see me drink water real quick, it's because my throat is really sore. So it's hard to get through the whole podcast without drinking a little bit of water. But that's besides the point. Let's get into it. Who will be the most impactful freshman this year for the Terrapins? There's a couple of names I went back and forth with because there's not like a clear guy in that room. Last year, everyone would have picked Jaishawn Barham. It was obvious. People knew he was going to be a starter right away. But this year, it's a little bit harder to pick just one guy because there's not one guy that stands out. I think there's 3 or 4 guys that are really good players that kind of stand out. And I think one of the guys I considered was Michael Harris, a highly talented 4-star linebacker, really good overall player. Still has to add some weight to his frame, but will be a really good player down the road. I think the reason I didn't choose him was because of how loaded that linebacker room group was overall, with Jaishawn Barham and Hippolyte and Wheatland. There's just too many bodies in that room, I think, for him to play. I think there's too much youth in that room for him to play. Maybe he'll be sprinkled in here or there, but that's kind of the reason I didn't go with him. But like I said, down the road, Michael Harris will be a really good player. And then I thought of Ryan Manning. And I was actually watching St. Francis play this weekend. I was watching some high school football. I'm waiting for the college football to kick off, waiting for the Notre Dame to start. So I was watching St. Francis play somebody. And St. Francis, if you don't know, one of the best programs in the whole country, hotbed for recruits in Baltimore, Maryland. Get all the top players, really good program overall, year in and year out. And last year, Ryan Manning did go to St. Francis, and they were talking about on the broadcast how losing Ryan Manning has actually hurt St. Francis a lot, losing that number 1 wide receiver for their quarterback. I think Ryan Manning was a little bit underappreciated. I think you could have made him a 4-star recruit. I think he was a really good player in high school. I think he was one of the best wide receivers in the country. Obviously, wide receivers are loaded right now. There's just so many wide receivers in the country. There's so many good ones, good quality players. But I think Ryan Manning was one of the better players. The only thing is, for similar reasons that I discussed with Michael Harris, the wide receiver room is loaded, probably our most loaded position group. It goes like 6 deep with Tyrese Chambers, Kaden Prather, Jeshaun Jones, Octavian Smith, Shalik Knotts, and there's just so many guys in that group that it'll be hard for Ryan Manning to play. But if you remember, Coach Locksley did talk about how Ryan Manning could be the returner this year. He talked about how Ryan Manning was in the mix to be the returner. So don't be surprised to see him go in there a little bit against Towson and return some kicks, return some punts. We'll see what happens. I don't know if he ended up winning that competition or is even in the same battle. But Coach Loxley did mention that Ryan Manning was one of the players that are in the battle for that wide receiver position at the kickoff spot and at the punt return spot. So we'll see what happens with that. And then these are kind of the two that I kind of settled on, but I had to choose one of them, of course. And the one I did not choose was Rico Walker. Rico Walker is going to be a really good player, maybe the best athlete, highest overall recruit, depending on what website you looked at. 4-star composite ranking, top 300 guy on the composite rankings, really good player. Played a lot of defensive end, actually, in high school. That was his main position. If you watch his huddle games, most of the plays he was making at defense was at defensive end, but Maryland plays him at tight end. He did play tight end, of course, in high school too. But Rico Walker is going to be a really good player. One college football analyst was talking about him as a player that could be a breakout candidate for the Maryland Terrapins. So expect Rico Walker to be really good. If you look at the current tight end room, of course, there's Corey Dyches, one of our best overall players, who's going to be one of our best players this year, who's like 6'2", one of the fastest tight ends in the Big Ten. And then Preston Howard, who's now a redshirt freshman, has a year in the system, really talented also at 6'6". I expect him to be the second tight end, and I expect Rico Walker to be in that mix and play a lot at the third tight end. Just because you hear third tight end and third string, that's not really what it'll be. He'll mix in a lot, and I know the staff wants to put him in because he can make some plays. He's a freakish athlete, and he's going to be a really good player down the road for the Maryland Terrapins. But then I moved on to Neo Avery, and I settled on him as my Maryland Freshman Football Player of the Year. 4-star pass rusher out of good counsel. I think he'll be in the pass rushing rotation right away. I think he's going to be one of the better pass rushers right away. If you look at the pass rushing room right now with Donnell Brown, Quayshawn Fuller, and Kellen Wyatt, who was a freshman last year, I expect Neo Avery to rotate in with those guys and show some flashes of greatness. He's 6'6", can really move, can just do it all. He has traits. He's long. If you watch his huddle film, he's the exactly type of player that I've kind of wanted Maryland Terrapins football to get. But a 4-star recruit, and I think he could have an impact. I was reading one article that said he might overtake some of the other veterans of the group. I guess they were talking about Donnell Brown or Quayshawn Fuller to be a starter later on. I'm not saying that'll happen. I have confidence in those guys to be one of the top players, but he could right away be in the pass rushing rotation. I think he'll play a lot. I want to see him against Towson. I'm going to have my eye closely on him, but overall, really talented guy. As he continues to improve, fill out his frame, he's going to be one of the best players for the next couple of years at Maryland Terrapins, and I'm hoping he's the type of pass rusher that we've been missing. I'm hoping he can be that type of player. As a freshman, I haven't even talked about him a ton, but I can't wait to see what he can do. And like I said, I'm going to have my eyes closely on him this weekend at the Towson game. If you want to know the Defensive Player of the Year and the Offensive Player of the Year, stick around after this message. Now's time for your Game Changer of the Week, brought to you by Athletic Brewing Company. Much like Taulia Tagovailoa, Athletic Brewing was completely changed the non-alcoholic beer game. They make non-alcoholic beers that actually taste good. Don't have to worry about hangovers. I've talked to many people in the Locked On community, and they say they taste great. They're the fastest growing non-alcoholic brewery in the U.S., so get on board. You can find Athletic Brewing Co.'s non-alcoholic brews at stores near you or buy online at athleticbrewing.com. First-time customers can use Locked On to get 15% off your first online order. That's Locked On at checkout for 15% off at athleticbrewing.com. Exclusions and conditions apply. Athletic Brewing Company, fit for all times. Who will be the defensive player of the year this year for the Maryland Terrapins? And I had a little bit of trouble. It came down to two guys. I think you guys can guess. I think these two guys were the main two guys I was picking between Beau Brade and Jaishawn Barham. And I ended up having to go with Barham. I think Barham's the most talented player on our team, is on every award list of best linebacker of the year, defensive player of the year, all the college football award list. He's on freshman All-American last year. Most talented player on the Maryland football team, including offense, defense. He's the most talented guy right now. He'll play on Sundays. He'll be a first, second round pick. He has a chance to leave early. I hope he doesn't leave early as a Maryland Terrapin fan, but he definitely has a chance to leave early after his junior year. But he's a current day linebacker because he can rush the passer, he can pass coverage, he can stop the run. He does it all for the Maryland Terrapins. He had 4 sacks last year, so sometimes they just put him on the edge and rush him from there. He's really good at that. He can do that really well. He can stop the run from the middle linebacker spot. The only thing is, I've talked about this, but the staff, they cannot rotate him out of the game. If you want to rotate the other linebacker spot, okay. But you cannot rotate Jaishawn Barham out. I understand you want to get many different players on the field. I understand the wide receiver group, the linebacker group has a lot of guys that you can play. But Barham is too good to be out of the game, especially when we're in a close game against anybody. I don't care who it is. Unless we're blowing someone out, Barham should be in the game, or unless he's injured, which I hope he never does. But he should always be in the game for the Maryland Terrapins. Like I said, he had 4 sacks last year, and he had about 50 tackles. I think it was 49 to be exact. I want him to get closer to 70, 80 tackles and be the leading tackler this year. Last year, Beau Brade was the leading tackler, but I want Jaishawn Barham to actually be the leading tackler this year, and I think he will be, especially with paying every snap, which I expect him to do. But 4 sacks is kind of going to be hard to beat because 4 sacks at the linebacker position is a really good spot, unless they plan on blitzing him a lot. And I hope we don't have to blitz much this year in terms of how our pass rushing plays. I hope we don't have to blitz as much. But, of course, if Jaishawn Barham ever does blitz, I'm okay with that because he's a really good blitzer. He's really good coming off the edge. So if those edge guys aren't working for some reason, you can throw Barham over there at the edge on a 3rd down, a 3rd and 10, 3rd and 9, whatever it is. If no one's able to get pass rushing in the game, which I hope that doesn't happen, I want to keep him at the linebacker spot because he can cover too. He's a doodle guy. He's going to play on Sundays, like I said. He's going to be a 1st or 2nd round pick. I think. I could be wrong, but we'll see what happens. But he was one of the best players already on Maryland's defense as a freshman. You could also go with Beau Brade, like I said. Beau's a really good player at the safety position. Beau's awesome. He's projected to be a top 5 safety drafted in next year's draft. So it shows that where we are as a program, if I have trouble picking the defensive player of the year, and I'm talking about 2 guys who could be early draft picks in the NFL draft, I think we are in a really good spot overall as a program. So I'm excited to see what Beau and Barham can do. I hope they make it hard at the end of the year. I hope they both have awesome seasons, and I expect them both to have awesome seasons. I expect them to both have awesome starts against Towson and both make a couple of really big plays against Towson, but we'll see what happens. And next, let's go on to the offensive player of the year, and I went with Romany Hemby. Yes, some of you guys might have wanted Jeshaun Jones. Some of you guys might have wanted Kaden Prather. But I had to go with Romany Hemby because of what he brings. I think he makes the offense go. I want to see us run the game more. And I think with Josh Gaddis, one of the things Coach Loxley talked about was a better run game this year and new run game concepts. So that can help Romany Hemby overall propel him to over 1,000 yards this season. Last year, finished a couple yards short of 1,000 yards, so it was basically a 1,000-yard player. But I want him to also have like 200 yards receiving. I think he's that type of player. I think he brings that explosive ability out the backfield. He has ability to take a 5-yard game for someone else and make it into a 60-yard game. You know what I mean? Like he has that type of ability in the backfield. So I'm expecting Romany Hemby to have a big year at the running back position. Last year he was probably our offensive MVP. He was a breakout last year, but everyone knows about him now, and everyone's going to be game planning around him because so he won't be able to quite burst on the scene, and it won't be as unexpected as last year. But I'm expecting a big year for Romany Hemby, and like I said, I want him to be closer to 1,200 yards. And well, I'll say this: it depends because the running back room overall is stacked with Antoine Littleton, Brown, who's a talented 4-star freshman, Colby McDonald. There's a lot of guys. So if they want to rotate those guys in and out, I'm okay with. Of course, I want Romany Hemby to get the bulk, but I'll say I expect him to go over 1,000 yards. I'll keep it at that. Because of Antoine Littleton's going to get carries. Brown is going to. There's just too many guys. You know what I mean in that room for him to put up crazy numbers. If he was getting like the bulk of the carries and we didn't have confidence in the rest of the room, then I would expect Romany Hemby to have a ton of yards. But I talked about it. I thought our running back room was one of the most underrated rooms in the Big Ten. But I think Romany Hemby is what makes the offense go. It can be the difference this year in the offense. And I wanted to be a tad more consistent. I want to make that point. Last year against Michigan is the game that stand out in the game that was close. Antoine Littleton got a lot of the carries because we couldn't get Romany Hemby going early on. He averaged like 3.8 yards per carry that game, while Littleton was almost at 5 yards per carry that game. So you could blame that on the offensive line. That's not necessarily his fault. There's different components to that. Of course, Michigan's defense is awesome, so you don't expect him to just average 8 yards per carry against them. But I want to see him be a tad more consistent at different times during the year. And if he does that, then he will be the offensive player of the year. Like I said, I thought he was probably the offensive player of the year last year for the Maryland Terrapins, but I expect him to be the offensive player of the year this year again for the Maryland players. Who will be the most valuable player and the most improved player? We'll talk about this. We'll talk about that after this message from Game Time. Have you ever wanted to go to a game at the last minute, like a Maryland Terrapins game, but finding tickets is hard? I have been there before. Buying tickets to your favorite events shouldn't be stressful. Game Time is a fast and easy way to buy tickets for all the sports, music, comedy, and theater near you with killer deals on last minute tickets and their best price guarantee. You can stop stressing over tickets and start getting hyped for the fun you'll have. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem a code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guarantee. All right. Who will be the Terps' most improved player this year? Most improved. I did go back and forth also with many guys. I thought of Preston Howard. I thought of Kevin Wyatt. There was many different players I went back and forth with in terms of most improved. But I ended up going with Tommy Aking-Basote, the defensive tackle. It's a huge year for Aking-Basote. A huge year. He's a junior now. Came in top 200 recruit. I was reading a quote that said he expected to come in it for it to be easy because of how highly rated he was on all the recruiting websites. But it hasn't been that easy for Aking-Basote. I expect him to be a starter alongside Jordan Phillips. But like I said, it hasn't been that easy for him. He showed flashes here and there. He had 2 sacks last year. And that's one of the main things I think he brings. I think he brings some pass rushing ability from the defensive tackle spot, which you don't normally get. You don't normally see. We'll see this week against Towson if it shows, but he does bring a little bit of pass rushing ability from the defensive tackle spot. I think he complements Jordan Phillips really well. I think Jordan Phillips is a run stopper in the middle there. I think King Basote can stop the run, obviously, but I think he can offer some pass rush. But it's a huge year. I'm expecting him to be one of our best defensive players, and we need him to be. I hope he's a breakout player and the most improved player because we need the defensive line to be able to be better. So at the end of the year, I hope I look back and be like, man, I was right about a King Basote because we need him to be like that. He's rotated in the last couple of years, but we just haven't seen what we expected. But there's still time. There's still time for him to be that type of player. And I'm kind of expecting him to take that jump this year because if not now, I don't know when it's going to be. I guess you could say next year, but this is his first year as a full-time starter. So I'm expecting a King Basote to lead that group along with Jordan Phillips and lead it and be a really good group. I'm expecting it to surprise us a little bit. That's one of our biggest question marks is that defensive line group, but I'm expecting it to surprise us a little bit with those two guys, and I expect a King Basote to be the most improved player. Now to the MVP. You could have guessed it, Taulia Tagovailoa. It's a pretty easy pick. He's been our MVP. He's one of the Maryland MVPs ever, one of the best Maryland quarterbacks ever, one of the best Maryland players ever, franchise or college-changing program player. He's changed everything. We were in the dumps. Coach Loxley's first couple of years barely could win any Big Ten games, barely could do anything, and now look where we are. I was looking at that thing on Twitter. We're picked as the 4th best team in the Big Ten by some sites. And before expansion happens and before Oregon and Washington and USC and UCLA all come into the conference, we need this year to have a good year because we're no longer going to be 4th in the best in the conference by some people. Some people have us as like 5th or 6th. Just depends on where you look. We're not going to be that high. I hope we eventually can get there. But right now, those programs are just in front of us. Some of those programs that are coming into the Big Ten. So we need Taulia this year. I need a signature win. But at the end of the day, he's going to be the team MVP. I think he has a chance to have his best season yet. In terms of, I'm not going to say in terms of stats. I talked about this on the last podcast. If Taulia can break his stats from 2021, I don't want him to because that means we're down a lot. We can't run the ball. He would have to pass for over 300 or about 300 yards per game. And I don't want that because I don't want us to have to depend on him. But I want him to still have a really good season. I think he can have the best season he can. I think he has an awesome group of wide receivers. I think he has an awesome group of tight ends. And so I think he has an awesome group overall. It's Coach Loxley's best team yet, but he's been a transformational type of player for the Maryland program, and he'll be the team MVP. Even if he has a little bit of a lesser year than we expect, he'll still be the team MVP. I don't want to say we go as far as he goes, but we go as far as he goes. If he plays well, we probably play well. If he doesn't play well, then we probably didn't play that well. Maybe not to that extreme. I think we have other talented players that will allow us to play well, even if he doesn't play well. But every site has him as like a top 25 quarterback in all of college football. He'll be off to the NFL next year. People are expecting him to be a mid-round pick. He's just overall, he's exactly what we want in Maryland football. He declined an offer of $1.5 million to leave, and he didn't do that not to come down as the most valuable player on the Maryland football team. But that's all we have for today. Tomorrow, we're going to be talking about Towson a little bit more. It's game week, so like and subscribe because a ton of content is coming out this week. Also, look out for, I'm supposed to have an interview with Ryan Howerton come out, so look out for that. But thanks for listening to Locked On Terps.